Facebook. Also feel free to connect with us on our Twitter handles at KUTV_Kenya. We're now moving into the moment where we have our discussion of the day. And today we're talking on matters climate justice. Environmental and climate justice is a civil right issue. We all depend on the physical environment and its bounty, sparking a need for responsibility from all. This is a central argument of climate justice, a reshaping of climate action from a technical effort to cut emissions into an approach that also addresses human rights and social inequality, and to address these matters of concern. I'm joined by a set of notable minds in the continent who are avid on climate justice and their campaigners. First, I have from Zimbabwe. I'm joined by Elizabeth Lugulu. Elizabeth Gulugulu, kindly introduce yourself to the viewers.
Thank you so much. Yes, my name is Elizabeth Gulugulu. I'm from Zimbabwe. I work for a couple of environmental organizations, the African Youth Initiative on Climate Change, and also the Global Focal Point for the Children and Youth Constituency of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Yeah.
And we're also joined by Lucky Obdeng.
Yes.
Introduce yourself to the viewers.
All right. Good evening, viewers. My name is Lucky Obdeng from Nigeria. I'm a young digital activist, and also I work with the Commonwealth Youth Climate Change Network. It's called the CYCN, which is one of the 11 youth networks of the Commonwealth, and I currently chair the Grassroots Engagement and Participation Committee of the CYCN. Thank you very much.
Notable minds indeed.
Yes.
And we'll just jump right into it. And I'll begin with you, Elizabeth. My friends from the motherland, we're all from Africa.
Yes.
And there has been this talk, even our president, if you were to look at our bulletin before, he talked of the emissions and the effects that are facing the continent coming from those countries that are away from Africa, the Far East, the Far West. All these countries are shedding a lot of waste that is affecting the continent, yet we cannot even match up to the waste that is happening. And I'm looking at this as, is it that we are complaining too much as Africa, or is this the case as it is?
It is the case as it is, as you have rightfully mentioned. Africa on its own as a region emits approximately 4%. And we have the developed countries that emits the rest. So when Africans are demanding for loss and damages, when Africa are demanding for climate finance, is because we have contributed less to the effects of climate change. Yet we are the ones who are who are actually facing the impacts more, because we have a low adaptive capacity when we are receiving low rainfalls, when we have a lot of floods that are coming in. Our crops cannot sprout because we do not have enough rainfalls. Our livestock, our infrastructure is all destroyed, but yet we are contributing less. So it's an issue of climate injustices. So when African countries are demanding, it is what it is. That's the issue that is actually at hand.
It's the matter on the table.
Yes.
And let me come to you, Lucky.
Yes.
Now, in Africa, we have most of the proposed, as they say, third world countries, developing countries, which means for some reason or the other, we have not yet reached a certain status to be considered countries that are there. Could we see like the journey to seek industrialization within our own countries, within the continent of Africa, are costing us, and we are overlooking the cost that is coming towards us in matters of climate, the effect and the impact on climate?
No, I wouldn't say we're overlooking the issues that is before us when it comes to getting industrialized. If you also look at the context of climate justice, one of the things Africa is also saying is that we need to develop at our own pace and not the pace of the global north, like we call them, you know. And just like Elizabeth had mentioned, we contribute less than 5%. The details are there. IPCC report and other scientific report has shown that we contribute less than 5%. And they just need to allow us to develop at our own pace, and we have been, they have developed, the global north itself have developed their countries and are being considered as developed while we are still developing. with the same resources they got from us, you know. And we are only saying that we have to develop at our own pace with our own resources, because we cannot develop if we don't use what we have.
Now, Elizabeth, you are a campaigner for climate justice. Looking at what just Lucky has just spoken about, the whole idea of industrializing at our own pace. Now, for one reason or another, we have seen the developed countries, they've moved at their pace, at the level where they call they are, but they are seeing a lot of changes within their whole social and the whole climate situation in their countries is quite not where they would want it to be. That's why maybe Africa becomes a safari region, the place where you want to tour and all. Now, what do you think we are doing or we should do to ensure that even as we industrialize, we don't necessarily meet the negative impacts of climate change that these other states within the, I say by quote, developed countries are facing right now within their regions?
Thank you. I think that is a very important question, because when you talk about that question, we now look at different sectors that actually build the economy of Africa. So we're looking at the agricultural sector, normally referred as the agriculture, forest, and other land use. When we are practicing our agriculture, right, over the years, we have been doing it in a way that is not sustainable. But at the end of the day, when we are practicing our agriculture, we need to make sure that, number one, we put food on the table. Number two, we have some incentive, right? But how can we do this in a way that we are not polluting more, that we are not contributing more to greenhouse gas emissions? This is where the components of climate smart agriculture come in, which looks at trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the agricultural sector, making sure we're trying to adapt to the effects of climate change, because we have now believed that, yes, we can try to reduce the effects of climate change, but what is needed is to try to survive with the changing effects, right? So this is where we talk about water harvesting techniques, coming up with drought-tolerant seeds, and at the end of the day, we need to make sure that there is sort of like food security, which I mentioned. But we also have other sectors, the waste sector, which also contributes its own fair share to greenhouse gas emissions here in Africa. Not much, but we have like methane, because sometimes the way we dump our waste is not that sustainable. The waste sector, how are we going to make sure that we are reducing plastics? How are we going to make sure that even our packaging is more sustainable? It's not all plastic, but it's something that is biodegradable. Then we also move on to the industrial processing sector. We have cement, we have fertilizers that we manufacture, which contribute to a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. We need to replace all those with something that is less. Like now, people are now talking about biofertilizer, whereby we can use like water hyacinth, your manure, which is actually good, which works good for your field. And last but not least, energy. This is the most important topic, because people will tell you that we have our coal and we need to use our coal. Like I was telling you, that we need to develop at our own pace. But as we develop at our own pace, we need to make sure that there is a just transition. So we are now looking at how best can we invest into our renewable energy system. We're talking about our solar, we're talking about wind energy, we're talking about biogas digesters. So this is how we can get to reach where we are, but in a more sustainable manner. Yeah.
Thank you very much for answering that. And when you mentioned agriculture, I was drawn to something I've been able to read about you, Lucky.
Yes.
You're involved in agricultural practices and in a very unique way. I won't even divulge over, because I'm also interested to know how and what you're doing. So kindly give me a detail of how you're doing this, and also looking at the fact of also the climate in what you do.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. So it's a funny way I got into agriculture. I was engaging with the Nigerian agreement to the Paris agreement, which is called the NDC, National Determined Contribution. And before the review in last year, 2021, the revised NDC, we have in our NDC, in the energy sector that Elizabeth mentioned, we had said we're going to, as our own contribution to reducing our emission rate, we're going to be blending our fuel with ethanol. And this ethanol has to be gotten from cassava, and Nigeria is the second largest producer of cassava in the world. Then ethanol is going to be gotten from cassava, and we don't have, people don't even understand that what they are farming will be needed by the government. The richest black man in Africa, Dangote, is currently building the biggest refinery in Africa. Dangote will be needing ethanol from cassava. So I saw a gap, I saw a niche, and I decided to go into cassava farming. Currently, I have a business registered back home. It's called 1 Man 1 Hectare. Funny name. So I had to get women who are farming cassava, ensure that they all have 1 hectare, minimum of 1 hectare. Got them into clusters, and then they farm cassava, and then you come to buy. So buying cassava from these women, you are already trying to eliminate waste because they just farm cassava for personal consumption. So you're buying their cassava to industries that process to ethanol, and then you're supplying to petroleum refineries. Now, Nigeria's plan is to blend 5%. And if you do the maths and if you do the science, if you're blending your fuel, your crude oil, refined crude oil as you call it, with ethanol, there's this reduction in emission, because now, just like Elizabeth said, we need to transition justly, but also at our own pace. I'm not sure Africa has the capacity to start using electric cars now. We are going to be using fossil fuel cars for a long time. So that was how my whole journey into the agricultural sector started when we're like 2 years into business now, and I tell you, it's really great.
It's very great. In fact, my other side of the business mind is just showing me how they're just minting them dollars on the other side. And with the whole perspective, Elizabeth, I'll come to you and I'll ask you this. Now, like he's already facing the other side of the sun, I'm asking myself this. What is the contribution of poverty to climate in Africa? Because I have this perception that maybe you would alter or guide me in another different manner of looking at it, but there is a lot that we allow as countries, as a people, as different nations to be done within our countries simply because we are seeking that dime, you see. And as Lucky has put out there, right there, we are actually able to also make financial milestones, not necessarily at the cost of our environment. But this knowledge is not really out there. So the alternative is I try to survive at whatever cost. So looking at that perspective, poverty and climate, how do they marry?
Yeah, that's an interesting question there. I mean, one of the days I was actually having a chat with my colleagues, and I was telling them that, you know what, as climate change advocates, in as much as we get into the communities, engaging with communities, telling them to stop deforestation, sometimes we need to be real, right? In most African countries, approximately 30 to 40 or 50% have access to electricity. The rest, they don't. And right now we are talking about introducing electric vehicles. It's good. But if we want to be real on a more community level, these people, they do not have electricity, and what they depend on are the forests that are close to them. So what they will do is they want to survive at all costs, because this is the most cheaper alternative source that is available for them. I feel like it's unfair to tell someone to stop using firewood, especially if we do not have something to replace that firewood with. So they will cut the trees. When they cut the trees, these trees are not replaced. And what does this lead to? It leads to desertification. We're talking about, unsustainable practices of mining that are happening, People want to survive, right? But how the money is coming, where it's coming from, well, they really don't care. What they want is the money. But this is when we all need people like Lucky, who are like innovative, and I mean, they need to share their stories to more young people. Because I always believe that whenever there is a challenge, there is always an opportunity. So there is a challenge of, deforestation. In my community, we have this guy who said, okay, fine, there is deforestation. I want to introduce this cooking stuff, which will be used by this community. And then he also went to engage with schools, and then said, okay, fine, we are going to support young people to grow their trees. So as they are growing since grade 1, they need to monitor and manage their trees up to grade 7. By so doing, we'll be paying their fees. They need to know that this is where their fees is coming from. So they are mandated to protect and monitor. So you see that in some areas where this initiative is being done, trees are now slowly growing. But this is an opportunity that someone came, and a lot of people want to support him in his journey. And at the same time, he has also managed to support rural communities, especially young women that are actually facing these climate-related changes, and who also travel long distances in search of firewood. In the event of doing so, they are causing a lot of degradation, but they don't notice it. So it's something that can be balanced. We can contribute, poverty can contribute to some of these effects, but there are always opportunities in the space.
Now, Lucky,
Yes.
you're one who is dancing away from poverty. And among I think within a forum, you are among you serve in the 18 international task force
Yes.
members. You are a young person in this forum, I believe. We are all young people. There is a lot of young blood around us. We are all young people. I'm looking at young people in the whole subject of climate justice. How are we being involved? Are we like there? Are we almost there, or are we nowhere?
Personally, thank you for that question. That question is very personal to me, because I'm a young person, and every day the discussion of climate justice is gaining momentum. And I'll tell you here, we are not there. We're not there yet. We are trying to be there. Young people have been relegated to advocacy alone. If you look at cut across NDC's national commitment of government, the implementation strategy limits young persons to just advocacy, and they are not at the table. And even the policies they are advocating for are policies that were drafted by the older generation. I am one of the 18 international task force members of CHOGOM that just ended in Kigali. And I tell you, one of the highlight of CHOGOM was the intergenerational equity dialogue session that happened. And this was a session organized by the 54 heads of states of the Commonwealth with young persons to have a dialogue and say, what are the issues? And interestingly to note, climate change was at the heart of discussion at the intergenerational dialogue, because you need to start discussing there are job losses, young people are scared, there's migration. These are all the impact of climate change. Young people are not there yet. We are calling to be at the table to negotiate. We cannot be far from the table. We are the ones who wear the shoes. We know where it pinches us. You graduate from school, you can't get jobs because jobs are even closing up, businesses are closing up. This can all be traced to the impact of climate change. So we are not there yet. We are trying to be there. So if we are even discussing intergenerational equity now and asking to be at the table, what happens to the next generation? We are not there. Will they be there? Are we going to allow them to be there? So unfortunately, we are not there yet.
Oh. And looking at this whole issue of us being there and on the journey to be there, Elizabeth, there is something I noted. You're a member, I believe, of a focal point of the Children and Youth Constituency. I'm not quite adept with what all that is about. You'll tell me in a moment. But as you also tell me that, I'd like you to tell me how the inclusion of even the whole subject of climate justice, maybe from the levels of children from the young ages going up through the school system, can serve positively within our society in the African context.
Thank you so much. Just speaking of from where Lucky left, it is very important for us to include young people, because the gap continues to grow if we don't do that. People take for granted issues to do with climate literacy or climate education, but I always say that an educated community is an empowered community. An empowered community is a resilient community, right? So it all starts from education. The basic things are quite important. People should know how to save water. People should know how to save electricity. Young children should know that if they eat something, it has to be put in the bin, right? Young people should be taught how to eat healthy foods. Because if we don't do that, then we are creating a mess. We don't even have a future, right? So it has to start from, early childhood development, going upwards, right? If some of us had got this information way too early, I'm sure we would not be seeing a lot of young people that are sitting in the streets. The former minister of Zambia, the former finance minister, once said the high unemployment rate of young people in Africa is a ticking bomb. We want to avoid the situation where people look at young people and see a ticking bomb. When they see us, they need to see a future.
Potential.
They need to know that the solutions to climate change, this particular group of young people, they do have the solutions, they do have the innovations, they do have the energy. But it all starts from, information dissemination, making sure we break down these technical components that are being spoken in these negotiation rooms to, people that are in the rural community so that they understand how to prevent themselves from these climatic effects. And that'll be it.
And now talking about the matter that actually did bring you, I believe, to Kenya, the Nairobi Summer School. Tell us about the experience. Tell us what it's all about. And I'm starting with you, my brother, as you lubricate yourself for the next.
The issue that brought me to Nairobi, Kenya, is the second edition of the Nairobi Summer School on Climate Justice. And interesting to note, I was here for the first edition as a participant, and this is me attending the second edition as one of the resource persons. And I tell you, my engagement and trajectory in the climate justice space has can be tied to my participation at the Nairobi Summer School last year in August. I had left the Nairobi Summer School after learning and understanding the UNFCCC negotiation processes. I headed straight to Scotland to attend the 26th session of the UNFCCC, which is COP26. And I was involved in a number of conversations and side events with the knowledge from the Nairobi Summer School first edition. And now I'm here attending the second edition, and I must tell you, the caliber of young persons that are attending this second edition, it's amazing. Africa is prepared. I believe we have the technical expertise in young persons. They just need to understand the process, understand what it takes, understand what is greenwashing, what will work for Africa. We have the Sustainable Development Goals, and if you look at the statistics, Africa is not going to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. We have 8 years to go down the line. And you can tie this to lack of capacity building, young persons understanding the SDGs early. And we don't want to see that happen in the climate change space. We already have that. But one interesting thing from learning from the Nairobi Summer School is that when I left in September, I used my social media very well, my Twitter, even though I'm still trying to grow it. But the number of people and the caliber of persons I see follow me, when you look at their bio now, everybody wants to add a couple of climate change activists, environmental activists, and that is because young persons from the summer school are beginning to create awareness and advocacy using the tool of digital media, and that is why I earlier introduced myself as a young digital activist, a group of young digital activists from Africa who are also being sponsored by the Pan-African or facilitated by the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance to use social media and to create evidence-based narrative advocacy that people would see and also begin to join a movement of people who want to redeem
That is wonderful. I believe from you once took the fruit, you are now reproducing.
I'm now reproducing the fruit.
And that's a very wonderful thing.
Yes.
Elizabeth, tell me about your experience.
I mean, the experience has been amazing. This initiative and project that has been started by PAGJA and its partners, it has actually come at the right time, where we are saying that we are having an African COP. And PAGJA and its partners are playing its part in making sure that young people from Africa are equipped with the right tools to make sure that when COP comes, they are ready to understand the political dialogues, they are ready to understand the technical dialogues that will be discussed within the conference of the parties, which is something that has been lacking in the African continent. I talked about the importance of education, right? But also the importance of skills, learning to identify the skills that young people can actually pursue in their career. Because if we are talking about a just transition, we are saying that, okay, fine, we are thinking of introducing new vehicles, new cars, right? But who is going to drive that vehicle? Who is going to drive that electric car, right? We are talking about installation of solar panels. Who is going to manufacture the solar panels? So this school has been that enlightening to the extent that even young people that are here, when they leave, they now have innovative minds, to want to acquire more education, to want to acquire more skills that will actually benefit them. And they are just not benefiting them, but they're actually securing a livelihood. Not only a livelihood, sustainable livelihood, which is when we also talk about the component of, green jobs for young people, etc. So this experience has been amazing. It has been more than 7 days now, and we are almost about to conclude. But we would also wish for other young people to be part of this amazing journey. But yeah, I just want to thank PAGJA and their partners for coming up with this amazing initiative for the African young people, so that they are well prepared when COP27 happens in Sharm el-Sheikh.
It's wonderful, and even I appreciate this moment because they actually brought you guys closer to me. And for this moment, I feel like I'm so enlightened. I'm sure even the viewers at home are quite enlightened as well. Now, in the interest of time, unfortunately, we can't continue with this conversation. But if we had the opportunity, I tell you, it'd go through all the night. But I love what you've brought out, that the heart of Africa is beating because of the young blood that is within it. It's not a time bomb. It's actually something that is of potential, something that can actually bring a new transformation within the continent, even on matters of climate justice.